Greetings. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick tour of how I created this rendering this composite image in Photoshop, initially starting with a Revit rendering. I'm going to open up my layer box here, and I'm just going to give you a quick tour of it, and then I'm going to start from scratch actually. So all my layers being turned off. So it starts, I'm just going to walk through the layers very quickly to show you how it unfolded essentially, and then I'll take you step by step on how I did it. So here is the Revit rendering, and I titled it Revit Rendering. So just for reference, I like to put in the title the Revit settings in the rendering box. So it was set to best, it was print quality, and 300 DPI, and this is what it produced. Then I put a white rectangle. Let's see, did I duplicate that layer? Yes, I duplicated. So I duplicated the background layer. There's a white rectangle behind everything. Then I've got a kind of a swamp-like forest here. And oh, that's okay. That's that background. So yeah, no, two white backgrounds there. That was just another image that I looked at that did not work out. And then we got our fellow, and we got a couple in the back there. We got a girl playing in the front. And then this series of boxes I created, just trying to prove to myself that cropping and moving in on closer to the house. Basically, you know, this is about selling the house, showing off our renderings of buildings. So we don't want to get overly enamored, hung up with our entourage. You know, we want them to look good, but they are not the main show. So my thought was, we'll step closer to the house, crop, and I think it's best closest. That's how I feel about that one. And then an adjustment layer at the top, just kind of brighten everything up a little bit, bring the sun back out. Okay, so that is what I created. So I'm going to walk through that relatively quickly now. Okay, so let's start at the top, and I'm going to walk through the basics of what you need to know in Photoshop as to how to do that. So just very quick, the basics. So this is my layer dialog box right there, layers, and down here I keep my history. So Adobe, the interface is it takes some time to get to know it, but it's pretty good, I would say, relative to other programs like Revit, where you have things that are often hidden. If you see a little triangle down here, yes, you could right click and you could find other tools. So underneath the brush, I've got brush, pencil, etc. Here underneath the crop tool. I'm only going to focus on the tools that you need to do what I did. But long story short, the Adobe interfaces are pretty user friendly, I would say. And then I come up across the top here. So these are our tabs. And under Window is where we find a lot of helpful boxes, toolboxes basically. So History I have open, and I want my layers open, which I must have closed inadvertently there. So here are my layers, always an important role in building composite images, and my history. And I wish more tools, programs like Revit had a history that easily, you could just see as I cannot use this tool because no layers are selected. So when I'm on my layer, yes, and every time that I scribble, it registers right there, and it'll register, I don't know how many, 50 or so, I say as a rule of thumb. When you come back tomorrow and you reopen this file up, it'll all be gone. So it's not a long-term kind of tool, but in the short term, when you're doing things and you make a mistake, it's easy to jump back. So very helpful. And layers we'll talk more about. Okay, so starting at the top, most important is very important is the file types. So this coming out of Revit was a TIFF. So it had more information than your typical JPEGs. Typically we get JPEGs off of the internet and PNGs. So I'm going to do a save on this computer here, just to show you. So it is a TIFF, and so often we start with JPEGs here, and often we get PNGs. coming out of Revit, we could get a TIFF. We typically don't find TIFFs when we're looking for entourage and whatnot online, and I'll show you how to do that. But long story short is the PSD document. This is our Photoshop document. This is where we should save things when we are working. So I already did this once, as you already saw, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to call this one Take Two, and we'll see how close we could get to the first one. Okay, so PSD document, and that's where we save this. So now, okay, so that did work. So PSD document. So we were a TIFF, now we are a PSD document. This will be our working document where we return to, and then when we want to place it on a board, maybe an InDesign, or we want to submit it, you know, if we're in school and we want to submit it on Canvas, for instance, then we want to we don't want to submit the we wouldn't use a PSD document for that. We would want to compress everything. So we would come to Save As one more time, and then we would submit typically a JPEG or a PNG. TIFF would keep with the layers, and PNGs are really the best choice. They do the best job of kind of compressing everything. All right, but we don't have to get to that now. Okay, so now very important is resolution. All right, super important issue, especially if you're printing. If you're not printing, you could get by with screen quality, computer screen quality resolution, and that's basically 72 dpi. This is how it came out of Revit at 96 dpi, and if we want to print, we want it at 220 dpi. Okay, so for the screen, 72 is okay. I did put this on printing, but this is where it ends up. All different kind of outputs, software programs, cameras, whatever. These things are always set differently. Cameras will often make it at 72 dpi, but make it the size of a billboard. So this is a pretty big image. Let's call it 24 by 16. But it's at 96. So I treat everything like I'm going to print it. I don't see any reason not to. I just always kind of aim for that. Even though I do very little printing, I make it all of print quality. In school, that's especially important because we do a lot of printing. In fact, students do. So keep moving along. So this resampling locks the resolution in with the width and the height. That's very important. If I unlock it, now the resolution is doing its own thing. And then here I could further unlock. And now if I change this width, the height's not going to change with it. If I lock them in, they change together. Better yet, I unclick this, and now the height, width, and resolution are all locked in. So when I change this to 220, watch the size of this image drop. All right, so what I'm gonna gain in resolution, I'm gonna lose in size, and that's the way it has to be. You can't just take resolution and lose and not give up size. It's kind of a scale, a balance act. You get one or the other. So now let's watch it drop. And I more than doubled the resolution, and the image is now, let's call it 7 by 11. 7 inches tall by 11 inches wide, and that dictates how big I could print this thing now. So I can't put this on an InDesign board and stretch it to be any bigger than that. That is the limit. If I want a bigger image, I have to go back to Revit, and I have to print something above best, something above 300 dpi. I think there's something, I forget what they call it, above best, you know, whatever the greatest. And dpi, I think it goes up to 600, you know. And then of course you could render in the cloud and perhaps get better results, but you have to go back to the beginning if you want a, you know, you have to consider it from the time it leaves Revit to the time it's getting onto that presentation board. All right, so 220 is the answer to that question, and this is the height that I will live with. And I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to look at the people that I'm going to put in this, and I want them to be of a respectable height as well. All right, so 220, let's give that the green light, and we're good to go. All right, so that's that, and now my people who came out of Revit. So I'm going to quickly, while we're on the topic of resolution, I'm going to quickly run through these guys and evaluate them. I downloaded them, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that afterwards. I'm just going to continue with this train of thought. So image size, and this is an advanced Google search where I look for particularly big images. Typically, you're not going to find images this big. But even though it is a quote-unquote advanced image search, does not mean that the images are adequate necessarily, and we'll see that. I believe we'll see that. So this one coming right off of Google, 300. So I only want 220, so this is above and beyond. Some people say 300 is the magic number. But I heard 220 is all, you know, as far as what the naked eye could see in terms of how fine the photograph is finished. 220 I heard does the job. So I'm going to change this to 220, and then I'm going to actually gain some here. So this girl is 6 inches tall, which is big enough for my house, which that image is only 10 inches tall or so. So let's see, but let's just, for consistency, let's go to 220. And now she's 8 inches, nearly 9 inches tall. So she's ample height, good size. This fellow here is, again, comes in too big, 6.5 inches tall, and now he's 9 inches tall. So good, we'll keep him. And let's check out this couple here. Image size. So they came in 72. So this is where it's super important. If I were to put this onto my Revit house and they and then it went off to print as a composite image, they would be pixelated because they are not of the quality. Even though that image is of 220, just because I put a 72 in does not mean it's going to miraculously turn into 220. This part of the image will be pixelated. And worse yet, it'll look fine on your screen when you're evaluating it because 72 is good for the screen, but when it comes out of a printer, it will be pixelated, and you know, that's always upsetting not to have seen that. So it is very tall, though. It's nearly 2 feet square, so I'm still optimistic that it's salvageable. We turn it to 220, and now it's 8 inches square, and that will suffice for our 10-inch house. So these folks are all good to go now. Why don't we just save? So for good practice, I would save them. So they are PNGs, so they're all good. So PNGs allow for the blank backgrounds, and that's what we got from Google image search, the entourage, looking for the entourage. Let's jump into that real quickly now. Actually, I think I have one more. Let me see. My rainforest, my background. Let me just look at that one while we're here, and then we'll look for one more background. I'm happy enough with the way it ended up. Kind of goofy to put a rainforest behind that house, but so it came in at 72, and it's huge. This is a lot bigger than my image. So if I drop this to 220, now I'm down to 14 by 9, and that's what I was working with. All right, but now I'm going to jump into advanced Google image search. I'm going to bring that right over here into this window. Okay. So I went into Google, and then I went to advanced image search, and this is what I get. So this is my search box for that. And what I'm looking for are architectural entourage people photographs. All right. So by putting in architectural entourage, you are indicating that you want clear backgrounds. You don't want people with trees behind them where you have to cut them out. So this typically comes with a nice white background. If you don't put in photographs, you could get a lot of old school marker renderings, which are fantastic too, but that's not what we're looking for here today. So that's that. And then I go to image size, and any size means you're going to get a ton of tiny compressed images that are useless for our purposes, which are printing. So I'm going up to larger than 2 megapixels. And I don't need, well, I'll search for people just to show you. So this is what that looks like. So that's the girl I found, and the other folks should be around here somewhere. There's the couple, and then we found that guy walking towards the, walking with his bag. But what I want now are, yeah, this is where I didn't really know what I wanted. So let's just call it, let's just call it trees. Lack of creativity on my part here. Let's call it stand of trees. Let's see what that does for us. I think I was looking for a forest. Maybe something like this, and then the road will disappear behind the house. But that could be nice. That's fine. Let's not overthink it. Let's just save as, and if this doesn't prove to be any better, then we'll just stick with our rainforest. Okay, so we saved that. All right, so that's all there was to it then. Click over here, right click, save as, saved. All right, so now let's open that up. Let's go to our desktop where that just landed. And here it is. So first things first, we always evaluate, and let's see if this makes the grade, and it looks promising. So everything's locked in together, and when we drop to 220, we are nearly 10 inches wide. So I'm going to say OK with that. And let's get back to our original, which is one more over. Let's close. I'm going to close some of these. So yeah, let's just close that for now. And here we are. Okay. And let's go back in history. I saw a little black dot there. So, all right. So we got our images now. We have 3 people, and we have our forest. Okay. So I am going to bring them in. First things first, I'm just going to bring them right in, and that'll launch us right into a discussion of layers. So I'm going to go Window, Arrange, Tile All vertically or horizontally, doesn't matter. I just like to see them all. There are numerous ways to copy and paste things over from one file to another, but I just like to see what I'm doing. Okay, so this is my Move tool. So if I don't want to be on Paint or something like that where I'm concerned I might accidentally do something, I just always jump on my Move tool. So here I am in my Revit Rendering, and that's highlighted there, and that layer belongs to that now. That's my history. And then I jump over to her, layer changes, text changes. I'm just going to take her layer, left click, hold it down, and pull it over. And there she is. Click on this fellow, that's his layer. Click, hold, bring over. Same with the couple. Just bringing everybody right in. I'll bring in my background. So now these are PNGs. These are PNGs. That's what allows for that transparent background. That's the architectural entourage by putting the word entourage in. That's what I got. This, I did not look for entourage, and I've got, and they typically don't do swamp, forests, whatever it is, a rainforest, as entourage. So this came in locked, and it is a JPEG. So I believe we could just pull it over still, and yes, we can. To work with these, often you have to unlock them, but not the case just for pulling the layer over. And then let's bring over our new landscape as well. Again, a JPEG, I believe. I can't see it right there, but I believe it's a JPEG. And it is a locked background, but it comes right over. Good. Let's close. Let's close these folks. Let's Window, Arrange, Consolidate. And this is our file with everything. Let's get rid of these folks. Sure, we could save. These people have all been vetted, verified. Our landscape. So this is all, so let's not concern ourselves with that now. We don't need. And our backdrop, which looks promising. We'll see. Okay, and she could get closed as well. All right. And now we're back to our original. Okay, and here they all are. Here are our layers, turning them off. The eyes turn people off. We're back to our original. And there is the child. So I click on that layer. So right now I am on the 0 layer, so good practice would be to rename everything. Layers pile up quickly. So we'll do background rendering. Give it a double click there. We'll call this girl. That's my man. Couple. And I believe it's a rainforest. And trees. Okay, good. All right, so to quickly adjust these people. So I am on that layer. If I am on my background layer, I can move my background layer. So we definitely don't want to do that. So you have to pay attention to what layer you're on. That's my Move tool, and you have to be on the correct layer. Then we go to Image, we go to Edit. Free Transform is going to let me reduce the size of this person. We see the bounding box comes up. And good to know. Well, let me do this first. So now I'm going to start shrinking it, and then I could just pause. So I'm going to put her right next to the car as a reference. So a child this big, bending over a little bit next to an especially tall truck. I'm not exactly sure what the answer to the question is. Maybe about that height next to the door. Perhaps. And then if she comes closer to us, she grows. So, yeah. So, I mean, I'm moving her so far away that exercise was kind of pointless. That is what I did with the guy, though. But now just enter. So we'll get back to her. So man on, edit, free transform, shrinking. So he was back in the car. I did find it useful to kind of judge his height. He'd probably stand a little taller than a car, maybe. And then if he comes closer to us, he's going to get taller yet. That's kind of the way I do it. And we'll fine tune him as we go. Enter. Couple, edit, free transform. So I'm on the wrong layer. That's why he just got highlighted. So over to them, edit, free transform. And let's put them next to him for now. And then I had them back here somewhere. In which case they're looking too big to me. Something like that. And we'll fine tune them as we go. Okay, so now people are in place. And so very important, the layers. So we see them, we have our eye control. But very important, what I haven't done yet is talk about the stacking of layers. So in AutoCAD, we put layers, we separate things, we put walls with walls, doors with doors, windows with windows. In Photoshop, we do not do that. In Photoshop, we sometimes combine like things. That is a possibility. But more important, especially when creating a composite image, is for stacking. So here at the top, the north end of the list, those are literally on top. And each layer has its own opacity right here. So as I bring down that layer, we could see through into the house. Or to the house, not into the house, but we could see to the house. All right, and this layer, if my opacity is set at 100 and it's completely opaque, I can't see through it. But I can left click, hold, and drop it down below. And so now it is back there. And then maybe in this case, I want to jump on my background. So sometimes I just adjust opacity to just to see, just so that so now I'm back on my rainforest. So just to give me a sense as to, so I can see the whole picture at once, essentially. So I can see through the house and get a sense as to where I might want these big trunks to go, for instance. So also back to resolution. So the good news is that this image of the rainforest is actually bigger. It's set to 220 and it is bigger than my my original Revit rendering. Okay, so this is important where these images start to come together. We can't just, like, I can't take my Revit rendering and stretch it up to the size of this background, all right, because then I'd be pixelating that rendering. So that is the baseline, and everything is going to be stretched smaller to meet the house, all right? The people were bigger, and now I made them smaller. Same with this landscape. So just to reduce the size of these massive trunks, I am going to start with that. So I'm just going to go again into my edit, my free transform, and let's just reduce the size of this thing. Let's just start with, well, yeah, let's just make it the exact size. And I could open it up again, and I could actually gain resolution if I were to go to image setup, image size, and I reduce the if I reduce the size of the image there, I could actually gain resolution. But like I said, I'm content with 220, so I'm not going to worry about that point. Okay, so this looks okay. So I don't think this is what I did last time. Last time I had a big tree over here near them. But I'm not going to get concerned about this. So let us bring up the opacity of my house. And yeah, I'm not going to get concerned about the trunks of the tree. That's a minor point at this point. But let's turn that off. And now let's look at these trees. Let's turn them on. And now they are coming in a little small, actually. So so technically they are not big enough. Now this amount, and I know it's set to 220. This amount I would just cheat and I would let it pixelate a little bit. I don't think this amount of pixelation would be visible to the naked eye. I could be wrong. People might have different opinions on that, but for this little amount, I would stretch it. Yeah, but I wouldn't. But again, I'd be cautious. I wouldn't do more than this. Okay, so that's my caveat. I cheat a little bit, but not too much. So free transform, and let's bring it up. And ultimately, well, yes, let's just say that. Okay, good. And then we bring that down to the back. And I do like that. I think I like that more than the thick, massive tree. So I'm going to run with that. I'm going to keep that going. So rainforest is done. Okay. And now if I reduce the opacity here, I see this grid because from Revit I had a transparent image. So this is where my rectangles came in. So right here are my color pickers. If I double click on, so actually before I do that, this little arrow, left, right, perpendicular pair of arrows, that's kind of allowing me to pick between these two different colors. If I double click on the white, white's what I want, so I'm not going to change it, but I could come here, change it to red. If I really want pure white, the magic number is 255, 255, 255, and there are times in life when this really matters. Less so for what the rectangle that I'm making, but sometimes when you're doing masks, you want true white and true black to make true, because they affect opacity basically, and grays that are in between are not truly opaque, for instance, when it comes to masks, which we're not getting into in this video. But sometimes true white and true black matter, and this is where you could get to those colors. So now I have my true white, and I'm going into my rectangle tool, and this is going to create its own layer. So typically when you create new things, they often end up on the layer that you're on. I'm not on a layer, actually, because I guess once I went into rectangle tool, it's just going to create a new layer. You can see right on the top, so I have a nice shiny white rectangle. I'm going to take that right down to the back, and now behind my trees, I have a white backdrop. And this will occur. This will occur if I come and do a save as, and I save this as a JPEG. It will compress those layers. It'll compress all these layers, and it will have a white background. If I want to, when it comes to making boards, this is really important. I'm not going to get into it with this image, but it's a really, really important point. If I wanted to put this on a board just the way it is, and let's say that I had a bigger background on my board, like a big sunset, and it ran over here, and there were plans over the sunset, and then this sunset also worked here. So just to say that my backdrop is bigger than this image, then maybe I want to drop this image in with a transparent background. Maybe I want this to be the background. In that case, I'm not going to compress these layers. I'm going to make it a PNG, and I'm just going to put this rectangle on for my own visual sake so that I could just look at it now. Then I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to make a PNG, and it's going to have this transparent background moving with it. And then that could allow it to be incorporated into the board in a different fashion, a more interesting fashion perhaps, okay? So that's a little tricky, but it's important to know. So white background, just so that I could judge these trees. That's all I'm getting at. Is all I want to do is judge these trees. I want to judge the opacity of them. So right now I'm on my rectangle. Now I'm going to jump to my trees, which I brought to 33%. So that's full throttle. I'm going to pick these trees up. How much? All right. So I don't see, so these plants here are bigger than the couple. I don't like the scale of them, so I am going to bring it down. So yeah, I think I had it right. It was more closer to the tree tops. maybe something like that, so that we have some twigs, some small stuff down near them. All right, we'll call that good. Okay. I don't think I need it to be that. And when I was looking at my initial image, once I do that, I immediately don't like this grass, the Revit grass. I don't care for that so much. So one of the big goals as I play with that opacity is that this house is really the star of the show, and I don't want the background, and I don't want these people to overtake it. So that is why I'm going to play with the opacity. That's why I'm going to play with a couple adjustment layers. And I'm also going to crop it, because right now, as I often point out with my students when they present images, is right now this house is probably, let's call it a third of this entire image. I would say an equal amount of real estate has been given to this forest, however pretty, it's not that important. And then a third is given to that nice house, and then a third is given to pavement and grass. And so that's 2/3 that are kind of wasted. I like people for scale. I like making interesting images, but it's really about this house. So that's what I had in mind while I was kind of letting those trees recede to the background and letting them not be so important. So now I'm going to do the same with the couple. I'm going to drop them. Actually, just before that, I want to talk about one more thing quickly. Was the light, the situation with the light. That's the one hard thing to cheat in Photoshop is the direction of the light. So my rendering came out of Revit with the light coming from the left and producing this shadow underneath the truck, starting at its wheels and running to the house. Likewise, I see that this side of the house is in shadow. This roof edge is creating a shadow here. There's a little shadow underneath the eave here. So that's all to say that the sun's coming this way. So this guy's good. He's walking into the sun, so he's lit in the correct direction. This girl, her face is in the shade actually, and it looks like a little more sun's getting on her back and the back of her arm. So when I jumped on her layer, what I did was I come up to edit. So free transform allows us to change the size of the person, but transform has a lot of other options. Perspective's an interesting one when you are putting photographs on a wall inside a house. You're hanging pictures on your living room wall, and the Revit rendering is receding away from you. So you could if she were a painting on the wall, that would be perfect to let it recede. So enter, and then back to my history. But what I was looking for, edit, transform. So these are different, and skewing. We do some skewing when we create shadows. I'm not going to do that in this video, but that is important. I'll return to this exact photograph though, and I'll put photographs in another video. I don't want to keep this one running too long. But what I was looking for is flip horizontal. So now she is facing. So now the sun's hitting her back more. Okay. All right, and I'm going to keep working on her. I think she's a little too big, so I'm going to bring her down. And I kind of had her nicely framed in this backdrop here. I kind of liked her gesture, so I kind of gave her a nice clean area there. Nice clean frame. And they were good. So they were in the shadows already. So Control plus moves me in. Control minus zooms me, and Control 0 frames up the whole page. So they were in shadows, and that's why I tucked them in the backyard in the shadows, and they're like leaving the house there. All right, and he looks just fine where he is. Maybe I'll move him a little closer. Yeah, maybe I'll move him. Maybe I'm going to shrink him a little bit actually, as if he just got out of the car and he's walking maybe to go pick up the newspaper or something. So free transform, let's bring him a little bit down. I think he was a little closer in my original one, but I'm going to make an executive decision and change that a little bit. And then onto the ghosts. So I ghosted them all a little bit. So I don't want these hyper real people. So already this nice shiny truck came out of Revit. It's competing with my house as it is. So it's kind of a catch-22, or something to be concerned about is when you go to Revit City and you get all this nice shiny gear. you know, we don't want to upstage the house. The house is, you know, again, the center point. So it could make the argument that, you know, people are definitely better in Photoshop. Car looks nice, but I can't bring down the opacity. I can't really adjust it as easily. It would take more work. It could be adjusted, but it would take a lot more work than these people who have their own layers. Let's just say that. So be careful with consistency. The background, the car, the people, the house, the grass, they should all have some consistent level of realism. It's not hyper-realism. You know, it's kind of a make-believe collage, but you don't want things to stray too much. You don't want a hyper-real background with a obviously rendered, you know, nicely rendered, but obviously rendered Revit rendering. So, people in the background, fading a little bit as I do this. So it kind of makes them a little less important. You know, it's also kind of a style thing that's popular now. Reducing, so that's the girl and then the guy. Just a little bit. And then the very important are the, down here are the adjustment layers. And this allows us to do all sorts of things. I'm not going to get into it now for this one, for this video, but what I'm going to do is add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. I'm going to click on that. It comes up to the top, and now it has its own layer, so it's what they call non-destructive editing. I could turn it on and off if I don't like what I do. But often when you create a composite image and you bring all these different things together, you'd be amazed at how just some brightness right on top, it just ties, like all the different layers kind of start interacting or kind of belonging together a lot better. So, and again, if I were printing this thing, I'd want to make it too bright, a little too bright, because everything prints darker than it is. I'm going to get it just right for the screen. So I want it bright, but I don't want to wash out these lines. So you always have to look at the very brightest part, his shirt, her pants, her arm. We don't want those things going to, you know, white to the point that they're gone. And yeah, so let's just go a little too far. Yeah, so right here, you know, that's falling apart right there, the detail in the siding. So I definitely went too far there. But it could go pretty bright. I would say something like that. And then you could see it there. So I'm just kind of, as I flip, I'm staring at those bright parts to see if I'm losing detail. If I'm over brightening those trees in the back. If those trees want to come up a little bit. So in general, that's the approach. In general, I like it. Now, you know, the Revit grass looks like AstroTurf, so that's really the most disturbing part. I think I did everything that I did to the other image, so now I'm just going to go back to my cropping issue. So again, a third for the house is just not enough. This house is important, so I'm going to crop. I kind of liked her. I kind of liked her whole gesture, but I also like her in the foreground a lot. And I'm trying to get rid of as much AstroTurf as possible. I think I could really crop it quite a bit. We don't, like this whole corner, you know, when something's ugly in Revit, like, I don't know what happened here, like this soil went above this parking, which doesn't look good. So this whole corner, I don't really care for that, so hide it. It's not a critical part of the story. It's distracting. Get rid of it. So the couple are walking off. I'll give them just, oh, I guess I'll keep his foot. I'll keep his foot. I don't even know if I want to do that. I might end up getting rid of them. I know I cropped the car pretty far, but I'm going to keep a little more. Bring this down. I want the peak and just enough space around it. Something like that. You know, we could continue fine-tuning. So I think I cropped the other one tighter. If anything, I think I'd get rid of the couple. I don't know that they're adding much. And then if I went back into crop, yeah, I don't think we need the backyard story as well. I think it's dad got home from work, perhaps going to get the newspaper, and the you know, the daughter's playing over here in the yard. So I think that's good. I think we increase the amount of house. It's maybe it's not 50%, but it's a lot more. It shows it off a lot nicer. So the couple, we got rid of them. We're not using the rainforest. So let's just start from the bottom up. There is our white rectangle. There is our rendering. Trees coming in from the back. Girl, guy, and brighten it up. Let me just open up my my other one quickly. There we go. And just zoom in a little bit. So this one looks darker to me. Let's do a split screen, window, arrange, tile. Let's go horizontally. Yeah, it looks a lot. So then I will get on my move tool, control 0. So that's not really helping. So control minus, control minus. So they look, so she's brighter. The whole thing's brighter. This one's much brighter. The background's brighter. This one's definitely, I like the brightness of this one a lot more. He's brighter. I like him back near the car. Yeah, I think generally I think this one worked out a lot nicer. And I like, yeah, like she's still been ghosted a little bit, but we should be able to see that if I go girl, 66%. To maybe I did not do all my layers here. This is what happens when you don't. So that is my girl at 66, and then over here. So when you don't label your layers, let this be a lesson. Layer 1, 54%. So she's been reduced to 54 or opacity, and here it's 64, not as opaque. So I think this is the winner. Okay, good. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.